Hello, students. Welcome to the third part of an elementary school classroom in a slum written by Stephen Spender. In the first two parts, you've gone through the detailed explanation of the poem. And in the third part, I've tried to put together all those important points which you need to remember regarding each stanza and the figures of speech that have been used in each stanza. So let's go one by one. In the first stanza, the important points that you have to remember are that the poet portrays a pathetic picture of an elementary school in a slum. The children that we come across, which have been described by the poet in this stanza, they're deprived of basic amenities like nutritional food, hygiene, etc. We also come across that the school lacks infrastructure. There's hardly any teaching or learning that takes place, and the children don't appear to be taking interest in their studies. There are a few children described by the poet, like he takes example of tall girl and paper seeming boy. Both appear to be suffering from malnutrition, disease, and they are victim of poverty. There's another boy that he describes who's sitting at the back of the dim class. He's not noticed by anyone in the class. He's not interested in the classroom activity and is lost in his own dreams. He's dreaming of a squirrel's game that symbolizes hope, freedom, and curiosity. In case you are asked, like, what have the children inherited? So it's not just the disease that the poet talks about in the poem. You'll have to write that the children have inherited poverty, misery, disease, and despair from their parents. After the important points, we come to the figures of speech that have been used in this stanza. The first one is simile, where in the first leading to the second line, he compares the faces of the children like rootless weeds. Then where the poet has used metaphor in gusty waves in the very first line, then for to describe the paper seeming boy with rat's eyes. And of course, when he talks about the boy sitting at the end of the class and is lost in his dreams, he talks about squirrel's game. Then the poet has used tautology when he talks about the boy who has inherited the disease from his father. He uses the term twisted and gnarled. These are two different words, but they convey the same meaning, that the boy has deformed bones. So that is why the poetic device is tautology. He's used repetition in the very first line, far, far, and then there's an important figure of speech over here, pun. Pun, I have explained in the explanation also what exactly it is. When one word communicates two different meanings, then it is a pun. Here also in the poem, one meaning of reciting is reciting or repeating the lessons that are being taken up in the class. And another meaning of reciting is the inheritance of disease, repeating or reciting the disease of the father. So that is why it is a pun. So now let's come to the second stanza. The important points that you have to remember, keep in mind are the classroom walls. They're very dirty. Why they're dirty? Because they've not been painted for a very long time, because the school has not received the grants or the donations that they receive from either the government or the rich and philanthropic people. Then classroom walls, he talks about how they are decorated with pictures of Shakespeare's head, picture showing daybreak without clouds. Then there's a picture of a beautiful Tyrolese valley. Then there is a picture of cities with skyscrapers. And of course, finally, there's an open-handed map. And all these pictures, according to the poet, are donated to the school by outsiders. Another thing why these pictures are important is that these pictures represent the world of the rich, prosperous, and privileged, the people who do not reside in this slum. They reside in the world that exists outside the walls of the slum. And then world of these children, he contrasts it to the world of these children. The world of these deprived children contrasts the world depicted by the pictures on the wall. How? The pictures show the world that is rich, prosperous, and privileged, whereas these slum children are very poor, malnourished, and who do not even know what their life is going to be in future. Their world is confined to narrow, dusty streets of slum. Then, open handed map is irrelevant to these children because their world is limited only to the boundaries of the slum. They've got nothing to do with this map. They just see it hanging on the walls, but they don't know how to reach out to the world. They are told that the world is theirs, but they don't know how the world is theirs because for them, their world is the slum in which they live. Then, far, far from bounties of nature. The bounties of nature have been said represented by rivers and caves. And then the poet uses another metaphor, stars of words. Stars we all understand, famous personalities or people who do very well in the life. They're called stars. I'll take simple examples like any film star or any cricketer who's done very well, who's very successful, is a star, or a Nobel laureate is a star. So, well known personalities. Because he uses the word over here, stars of words. Words here represent education or literary world. So, that is why explanation to stars of words would be well known personalities of the world of education. Now, after the important points, if we come to the poetic devices which have been used over here, they are metaphor. In the very first line, where the second stanza begins, the poet describes the wall and compares it with sour cream. So, sour cream walls. He's not used any as or like in it. Similarly, lead sky, stars of word, and future painted with a fog. They are all examples of metaphor. Now, in repetition, there's repetition where he's used far, 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 far from capes and rivers in that line, and the world, its world, when he talks about the open handed map, when he introduces the open handed map to the children. Transferred epithet, civilized domes. I've explained in the first part of the video of this poem. Transferred epithet actually means adjective. And transferred means, of course, transferred from one place to the other. Now, domes are buildings. Buildings cannot be civilized. So, who does the poet refer? Poet refers to the people residing in these domes or buildings. They are civilized. But what does he do? He transfers the epithet, the adjective civilized from the people and gives it to the domes. So that is why it is a transferred epithet. I've also explained in the first part that wherever there is a transferred epithet, that has to be a personification. Here also you can see domes cannot be civilized. It is the human beings who are civilized. So the quality of human beings being civilized is transferred to domes. So it is a personification as well. Then synecdoche. Synecdoche means a part representing whole or vice versa. Now Shakespeare's head, it doesn't mean that only Shakespeare's head. It means the entire Shakespeare. Let's begin with the third stanza. The points that you have to remember in this stanza are the poet actually calls Shakespeare a wicked and map a bad example because they represent not the children of the slum but represent the world of the rich and privileged, and the children of slum cannot relate to them. The ship, sun, and love, they all symbolize the joys, happiness, and all the materialistic things enjoyed by those belonging to the world outside the slum. Next, the slum children do not get opportunity to possess them. What? All these materialistic things that he has mentioned. And so they are tempted to steal, that is, getting involved in unlawful activities to fulfill their dreams, to possess them. To possess these materialistic things, they indulge into unlawful activities. Then the poet has talked about that these children, they live in cramped holes, very congested houses. He's also talked about the children's life, that they slog from fog to endless night to make both ends meet. Fog and endless night. Of course, I've explained earlier also, this is an antithesis because fog represents over here morning, and morning and night opposites in the same phrase. That's an antithesis. Malnourished children, he describes them, and he also tells that the bones are peeping out of their skin. He also talks about children wearing steel spectacles with mended glass, which they have found in the garbage, and these glasses probably have been discarded by some rich person. Dreams and lives of these children are shattered like bottle bits on stones. So there is a comparison between the dreams and the lives, how they are shattered or broken, like a bottle breaks and breaks into small pieces of glass. Then he says, life in slum. What kind of life? Life in slum is like hell, or not even hell, it is worse than hell. Slum is not represented on the map, and it is considered a blot on the civilized world. So the poet says, if it is considered a blot, it needs to be eradicated. Now, after these important points, the poetic devices that the poet has used, first is simile. He's compared the lives like bottle bits on stone, and he's compared the slum as big as doom. Both of them are similes. Then he's used metaphor in their cramped holes and their slag heap. In the explanation, in the second part of the video, I've explained this their slag heap very clearly, and it is important, so just go through it again. Then he's used antithesis in fog to endless night. After this, finally, we come to the final and fourth stanza of the poem, where the important points are: the poet calls upon the governor, inspector, and visitor. All these people represent those who possess power and position. And the poet appeals to them to review the system, which will consequently elevate these slum children. So the poet is asking help from these people to improve the life of the children residing in the slum, because he believes that only then the open handed map will become the window to these slum children, which otherwise remains shut upon their lives like catacombs. Catacombs are graves. So the slum to these children is just like grave, they cannot come out of it. He also says that help these children break free from the shackles of slum. And why does he appeal? So that these children can be provided with opportunity to educate themselves. He also appeals these people to introduce these children to the world outside the slum. And then those who will educate, this is for the children, those who will educate themselves, will work hard, will excel, will outshine others, will certainly create history. Fine? Then the figures of speech that the poet has used in this stanza are simile, where he says that windows will shut upon their lives like catacombs. So their lives like catacomb, that's a simile. He's used metaphor, where he says that once they will educate, they will be free from the slum, the white and green leaves open. So that's a metaphor. And then the last line of the poem, history is there whose language is the sun. That's a very strong metaphor that the poet has used. He's also used repetition when he says windows will open, otherwise these windows will shut upon them. So windows and windows, these two words, the word is repeated, so that is why it's a repetition. Then when he appeals to the people, the governor or the inspector or the visitor, He appeals them to break or break open. So again, break and break has been used, so that's a repetition. Then there is anticlimax in the first line of the fourth stanza, where he says that the slums cannot be eradicated unless the governor, inspector, or visitor. It can also be said that the children cannot be brought out of the slum, or their life cannot change unless these people come ahead and help them. So this is anticlimax. Then there is anaphora. Now, what is anaphora? When two lines or three lines of the poem begin with the same word, like run azure, and then let their tongues run naked. So the next line, again, it begins with run naked. If you'll see the text of the poem, you'll understand it better. So that is an anaphora. Now, after you have gone through the third slide, after hearing the explanation of the first and second, I hope that there will be clarity that what all things you have to really keep in mind, which are important from your examination point of view. So, if you have to prepare the poem well, I think you'll have to go through all the three parts of this poem, Elementary School Classroom in a Slum, to be confident and to perform well. So, all the best, children. Thank you.